Hello, fine people. It is November 17th, and I thought I would do a little bit longer video to talk about what's going on right now with the EpiPen files. I've been doing some short videos like I usually do, but I thought let's have a longer discussion about everything. And I also just want to go over some of the information my guides gave me over the last year and how it's playing out now. Okay, so as of last night, we had another plot twist, right? A certain somebody, a certain orange somebody, decided after doing everything in his power for the last several months to stop any of these files from coming out and to attack people who call for them to be coming out. He decided last night to go about face and say, "Oh, I want them to come out." And of course, we're all suspicious, right? Because there's no way he actually wants them to come out. So why is he saying that? And, of course, he's up to something, right? So I wanted to talk more about this because I do feel like a lot of people are just getting kind of battered by all of this roller coaster that we're on, this emotional roller coaster of breaking good news, breaking bad news, right? And it's been mostly, I feel, good news for the last like week or so after the big election where there was the blue wave. But I know some people are worried, are worried. And so everything I'm saying is for entertainment purposes only. And allegedly, I'm a storyteller. For those who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Lisa Vest. Um, I am a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, a storyteller. I also have a background in philosophy. I'm a retired philosophy professor, and I also have a background in astrophysics. I'm also a poet. I wear a lot of hats. And about a year ago, my guides told me that they wanted me to start posting on a regular basis, making videos and putting them on social media to help people navigate the spiritual significance of the political situation we find ourselves in, and also specifically to help people to remain hopeful and to also help people to know what to do. How do we handle this situation? What can we do? Where's our agency? Where's our sovereignty? And so I'm also here to provide humor. And the humor is because we need to keep our vibration high. And so my overall purpose, as a being who incarnated on the planet at this time, is to help in the shift in consciousness, which we're in the middle of right now. And so along those lines, I do work in a number of areas that has to do with helping to raise the vibration. And so that's why I use humor and I tell funny stories. But I want to talk a little bit more seriously today about what's going on with the EpiPen drama. So for the last week, and actually for months now, but the last week he's kind of intensified it. The head clown has been very adamant about making sure that there's no release of files, right? And so he's more recently gone after some of his kind of loyal followers, including, Margarine, I've Seen the Light, and one of the co-sponsors of the bill to release the files, Massey, and has also gone after a few other folks, red hat people that have been his kind of loyal followers. And he's gone after basically anybody who has demanded that these files come out. So he's made himself pretty clear about the fact that he doesn't want them coming out. He's been looking super, super guilty by all of the stuff he's been doing. Despite all that, we've been hearing from various lawmakers of late that there were going to be a considerable number of people who were going to vote yes on this bill, and that was going to include 50 to 100 people from the other party. And so this was becoming quite the bipartisan issue, which really shouldn't surprise us, but it does, because everything surprises us these days because everything's so unpredictable. But, he did campaign on this, right? He did campaign on release the files, and then he did an about face. And there were a number of people, lawmakers, who also were saying that and kind of, had a rallying cry about this until somebody got into office. Then all of a sudden it's like, no, whatever you do, don't release the files because I'm in them. Allegedly. This is just my opinion. So here we find ourselves, right? And so right before he decided last night, oh, actually, I'm okay with them being released. He before that decided to tell his guard dog Blondie to open up a new investigation that was only going to look at blue hats. And some people are arguing that he's doing that because once an investigation is ongoing, they can refuse to release anything because it's an ongoing investigation. So this appears to be yet another strategy to prevent the files from coming out. And so I wanted to come on here and talk about that because I know people are worried. This is somebody who seems Teflon coated, who's able to commit a lot of crimes and is never held accountable, never spent one day in jail, despite lots of felonies and lots of felony convictions. And so I know that people have become kind of jaded, like, oh, it's never going to happen. He's never going to, And I know that might seem rational, like you should just accept that that's going to be the case. But I want you, instead of kind of thinking in those terms, I want you to kind of pay more attention to the energetic shift and also some of the evidence that suggests that things are really changing right now. It's kind of, it's easy to kind of focus on the bad news and the dramatic news and the things that make us stress and worry. And that's in part because, we're designed as humans to respond more to negativity and stress because that's a survival mechanism, right? And it's like that online, right? That people respond more to news that's negative, to posts that are negative. And it's not even a conscious thing. It's not like we seek out these bad things. It's that it's part of our survival mechanism that our body thinks we have to know about these threats. We have to prepare for these threats, right? And so we have to learn how to override that. And the way that we override it is by being more in touch with our higher self, with our spiritual self, and being not so controlled by our physical self. We got to keep those, aspects of ourself in balance. And so there's a couple of things I want you to pay attention to: some facts, some trends, and some energetic things. So energetically, we have seen an energetic shift since the 4th of November. So it's been 13 days, 2 weeks. There's been a big shift. We also saw a really clear pattern on the 4th of November in terms of what the American people want. We've also heard about shifts in polling, which show a very unhappy populace when it comes to the head clown. We've seen specifically, I was going to point to some specific polls. This is from CNN. There was a poll, and also Fox News, actually. So there was a poll on Fox where they reported that, there are rising grocery prices, rising coffee, rising utilities, rising vehicle repair. Now, this is a network that almost never says anything critical about the current administration, and yet they are coming out and saying, actually, yes, it's pretty bad out there. And then on CNN, they were showing that that they're actually 39 points underwater, specifically on this issue of the files. They're also underwater in terms of inflation, right? We're also just hearing about a lot of people burning hats, red hat people burning hats, a lot of people speaking out. We also have these like major red hat podcasters and public speakers who are coming out in ways that are quite critical of this administration. So Candy from Candyland, Tucker, and others. So you have to look at these patterns, right? So that you don't stress out. You have to look at the patterns. Until recently, one of the reasons why the circus was able to get away with what it was able to get away with is because it had widespread complicity, right, and support by lots of powerful people, whether they were thought leaders, podcasters, lawmakers, wealthy merchants, right? There was just this kind of widespread support by a certain segment of the population, a certain powerful segment of the circus. And that has radically changed. And it might be said that it changed on the 4th, but it was starting to change before that, right? We already saw with the unaliving of Chuckle Cheese, we saw a huge shift and a huge kind of fracturing in the big red tent where there were all of these factions that were no longer getting along. We saw that with, with Candy and with the Groyper movement. We just seeing this kind of mass splintering happening. And so that has been going on for a while, but it's really intensifying right now. And so we have to pay attention to those patterns when we try to evaluate what's going on today. You have to look at the bigger context. When we look at the bigger context, we see that the things that he got away with before, he got away with while he had, much more support in the population, much more support among various power brokers, and a more cohesive red tent. And we don't have that now. And so not only do we now have 50 to 100 red hats saying they're going to vote for this, even though he's very clearly has said don't, we also have, now I'm forgetting, what was I saying? It's hard to keep track of all these things. We also have all of these other things that they've done recently, right? So they just really haven't been supporting the head clown. These lawmakers. We've had, the tariff issue that they didn't support, the filibuster issue that they didn't support. There's been a number of things over the last, few weeks where they have been specifically asked to do certain things, and they have said no, thank you. That didn't used to happen. They used to be just slavishly devoted, and they would do whatever, jump how high, right? That's not happening. Not only that, but we have like these key people who were his most devoted, loyal dogs who are now in major battles with him over these files. So like Marjorie, who's seen the light, over the last 7 years, she could probably be identified as one of his most devoted soldiers, right? She defended absolutely everything he did, and no matter what he told her to do, she always did it. And flash forward to today, where they're in an open public battle because she refuses to back down about these files, and he is adamant that he's going to attack anybody who argues for the release of these files. So when we look at that bigger context, the patterns of changing support, the fracturing of the red tent, and we also look at the energetic shift, and we also look at the change in the popular perception of this administration. We realize that we're not in the same situation, and he's not in the same situation. And so if you're thinking, oh, he's going to find a way to evade justice, think again. Things have really changed. And let's look at some other evidence for why I say that things have really changed. Let's look at the release of the emails. So just remember, the emails and the files are not the same thing. The emails were released as a result of a blue hat subpoena that they did to the estate of the EpiPen, where they were able to get those documents sent to the Congress and then release them to the public. Now, they don't have the ability to do that with the files because the files are being held by the Department of J, and that is being controlled by the circus. Now, historically and constitutionally, the branches of government are supposed to be separate, and the DOJ is not supposed to be controlled by the president. But we're in this situation, right, where a lot of illegal things are happening and nothing's being done about it. So they are controlling these documents, and this is why it had to go to the Congress, and there had to be a vote to try to force them to release them. So when somebody says, oh, I want them released, we know it's a lie, because if he wanted them released, he would just release them, because actually he could just call up the DOJ and say, release them. There wouldn't need to be a bill. So we know he doesn't mean it. So we know that he's up to something, right? But just because he's up to something doesn't mean we need to panic. Do not panic. Get your trusty towel. Hitchhiker's Guide for those who are sci-fi nerds like me. So, so why shouldn't we panic? Because look at these emails. So these emails were released, and some of these were already in the public domain, and yet nothing had been done about them. And now that they're released, we're actually seeing the press cover it. And so this is another sign, right? The press has been totally hobbled for the last year. They haven't been doing their job. They haven't been reporting. They haven't been asking the hard questions. Why? Because every time they do, they get hit with billions of dollars of lawsuits, and it always gets decided in the circus's side because of the corrupt biggest court in the land, allegedly. So, so something has changed with the journalists. They are now reporting in a much more kind of daring way than they were before. And so they're also seeing the writing on the wall that he's not as much of a threat as he was before. And so with the release of these emails, we're actually seeing people discuss them in detail. And it's not just the mainstream journalists, because, they're not super reliable these days compared to all the amateur and independent journalists. But we have all these amateur and independent journalists on social media and YouTube and different platforms who are doing their own analysis of these emails. And I even saw someone very, very, very impressive analysis of the emails where this creator was using Chat GBT. I should have wrote his name down so I could share it. I'll share it later. And so he's using ChatGPT to go through, because these files, there's massive 20,000, not files, emails, 20,000. It's a mixture of text messages and emails and manuscripts and notes. It's just all kinds of stuff thrown together in no apparent order. So it makes it very hard for the average human to go through it. Well, this person has gone through and used ChatGPT. And that's the thing. We are living in different times now. We have access to AI to analyze, tens of thousands of words in a few seconds. We have access to these social media networks. We have a way to distribute and share information, and that didn't used to be the case. And so even though we can't rely the way we used to be able to on the mainstream press, we have all of these other sources of information now. And yes, it does become more challenging for the viewer because we have to learn how to vet things. There's a lot of people out there saying nonsense, and it's not reliable. And so you got to learn how to be discerning and figure out what's clickbait and what's actually reliable information. But if you have the time and energy to vet the information out there, there's a lot of information you have access to that we just didn't have access to a few years ago. And so as people are going through these emails, they're just finding all of this evidence of what my guides said a year ago. And so that's very exciting to me. And from my perspective, it gives me hope, because if the predictions that were made are coming true, then that means the other predictions are going to come true as well. That's kind of how it works when you're a psychic. If you get, a bunch of predictions and the time passes and they don't happen, then you're going to begin to doubt your other predictions, right? But if you have predictions and then they keep coming true, then you're going to have more confidence in all of your predictions, right? Not that they're all going to be accurate, because no psychic is 100% accurate. Even 90% accurate is extremely rare. I would say the best psychics in the world are 80 to 90% accurate. And I'm not claiming I'm one of the best psychics in the world, but I do feel like I'm fairly accurate. But that's really up to other people to say, right? Only other people can tell me whether they think I'm truly accurate, right? So those who've been following me and have heard the things I've said, have they happened, right? I'm going to leave that to you all to tell me. Have my predictions come true? Of course, they're not my predictions; they're my guides. But I'm the voice. I'm the voice. I'm the what's it? The mouthpiece. Okay, so before I go over some of those predictions from the last year, I want to talk about why we should remain hopeful. So people are worried that, oh, he's got something up his sleeve. Of course he does. He always does. And that's why he's pretending to support this, because he's going to maybe have his name redacted from everything, or only, release something that only has blue hat names on it. Of course, that's probably what he wants to do. And we know that he allegedly hired, well, I'm saying allegedly, but it was in the news. I just don't have the source right now. But he hired 1,000, there was 1,000 agents who were hired specifically to go through the files of Epi and redact all instances of the head clown's name. Now, why was he in there, right? If he was not involved at all and innocent, he wouldn't be in there. And if he was in there, he wouldn't need 1,000 agents, right? If you were mentioned a couple of times in some documents, even if it is like 50,000 documents, you could hire just a few people, right? Lawyers do that all the time. Lawyers have paralegals that go through boxes and boxes of documents. That's what they do for them. They don't hire 1,000 paralegals to look through a warehouse full of documents. They just don't. So the fact that there were 1,000 hired, that tells you something. But why am I bringing it up? Because yes, people are worried about this. Oh, he's going to redact everything. He's going to release everything. Well, I don't think we have to worry about that, because, and you're probably like, why not? Because the fact that there were that many agents and they also spent quite a bit of time on this. They didn't do it in a day. I think they spent months on it. Indicates how thoroughly he is enmeshed in these documents, allegedly. And so if hypothetically somebody had their name mentioned so many times in documents that it took thousands of agents months to redact them all, it's going to be really obvious, right? It's going to be really obvious. Also, we have other sources. So now that we have these 20,000 emails, which actually have a lot of incriminating information in them, that stuff can be cross-referenced with whatever they try to release, right? It's not like they just have complete control over the data, because there's all of this other data. But keep in mind also three other reasons for hope. One of those reasons is the estate. The estate that released these 20,000 emails has more stuff. They actually had access to a lot of the stuff that ended up going into the investigation and the files for the 2 court cases, right? A lot of those documents came from them, came from their house. So they're going to have some of those things. They're going to have some copies of those things. They're going to have photographs and videotapes. They're going to have some things that they're going to release. And it's already been rumored that they're planning to release more things. Now, because of the subpoena that's out, legally, they're required to. So that's one source of hope. And also, keep that in mind when you worry about, oh, they're going to stop the files. Okay. Number 2, we've got this journalist, right, who is in all of these emails, right? And he wrote a book about it, and he was in close contact with some of these major players. He's got tapes. He's already said he has tapes. He's got other evidence that he has not yet released. So there's another source of information that can soon be released, so that regardless of what the DOJ does, we still have these 2 other sources of information. And finally, number 3, there are other people who have this material. We have good reason to believe that there are other countries that have some of this information. And we have reason to believe that because of what we've already seen in the emails that have been released just in the last few days. There are numerous indications of the involvement of the leaders of certain key countries. One that starts with an R and one that starts with an I, allegedly. They're all over these emails. And so there's been a lot of evidence to suggest that these two main characters um, are possibly intelligence, what do they call that? Intelligence agents, intelligence assets, something like that, allegedly, for these other countries. And if that's the case, hypothetically, if that's the case, then they're going to have a bunch of this data over there, right? That they've been using for compromat and extortion and different things. There's a lot of evidence in the emails that have been released, and also an article that recently came out, I think it was New York Times, that showed that this trafficking ring was not just engaged in trafficking, it was also engaged in a lot of extortion of high-level men around the world. And that means there's a lot of financial records out there that may not, that are separate from the files, right? There's going to be a lot of follow the money trails out there. All right. So that's all my analysis, of the data, of the evidence, of the patterns, right? Now let's talk about intuition. Let's talk about what I was told and what has transpired. So of course I can't remember everything because I channel this information and then I present it and I don't necessarily retain it all, but I'm going to try to remember some important stuff. So I actually was talking about this maybe in November, December of last year when the joust first happened. What I came on here and started saying was the joust was finagled. It was finagled by the head clown, and he did not actually win. He did not have the popular support, and the actual ticket counters were manipulated using a satellite with the help of Starboy. I also mentioned that there were several wealthy merchants involved, that they were all accomplices because they felt that this circus was going to benefit their business, but also because some of them were implicated in a certain bad traffic ring, a global bad traffic ring. I also said that there were two countries implicated, Rasputin's country and also the land of milk and honey. Now, back when I was saying this is almost a year ago. I think probably people thought I was a little crazy. It sounded far-fetched, and I didn't really hear other people saying the same things I was saying. I kept kind of looking for it. And over time, more and more people were saying some of the things I was saying. And so what are some of the things I predicted that came true? I said that it was Starboy. Nobody was talking about Starboy. Now everybody's talking about Starboy, and lots of people think he was the one that did it. Not only that, but I said that the people who did this were going to publicly confess, and they did, lo and behold. Head clown publicly confessed more than once. Starboy confessed, I think, once or twice. What none of us was expecting was that they would confess and nothing would come of it. That was very shocking, I think. And so what what my guides had said, who had done it, was, I feel confirmed by these confessions. And of course, now we have ETA and SMART, which are gathering lots of data and finding that indeed there was digital manipulation of tickets in certain areas. So I feel like that prediction appears to have been confirmed. Now, when I was talking about, I did say also quite a while ago that the files of Epi were going to be key to the downfall of the circus. And I said they were going to be key because they were going to reveal to the public the extent of these global networks of crime, not only PDFery, but also gold bullion crimes, right? That are global. And so, and now these emails that have come out are showing that, right? It's showing in black and white the involvement of those two countries in the machinations of Epi, and they're showing, the amount of crimes related to gold bullion, right? So we are now seeing that in these documents. Um, so I feel pretty good about that, because what that tells me is that if I'm getting all of these things correct, my guides are, then um, maybe we're close to the end, right? Maybe my other predictions are also going to come true. And so I have predicted that he is taken out of office. I'm not sure exactly how. I've seen a few things. I've seen his very poor health. I've seen his demise. I've seen people trying to pretend that he's still with us when he's not. Um, I don't know if that's still going to happen, because, timelines split. And he seems to be able to just keep getting up and moving on. I have seen a lot of doctors working on him, doing a lot of things. And so different people, different psychics have predicted different ways in which he leaves. One of the things I have seen was I have seen kind of the storming of the Bastille, especially by the ex-Magatonians, surrounding the House of White. And what we are seeing is a lot of disaffection. And I did, predict that a lot of these red hats would defect, and that there would be lots of fractures within the red tent. And that has happened. I did predict that some of his staunchest supporters would turn on him. That has happened. One of the things I predicted that I'm not seeing enough of yet is that some of these wealthy merchants would turn against him. I've only seen a couple kind of be critical, and so I'm kind of still waiting for that to happen. But the other things have happened. The red hat lawmakers are turning against him. The general population of red hat wearers is turning against him, and they're getting quite angry. So we're seeing now videos of them being really angry, and that's also what I foresaw, was that they were going to get very angry and turn their wrath against the circus. And so this is one way in which it ends. Now, if and when the files are fully publicized, that will definitely be the end of the circus. But it might not even take all that, because what we have now is a snowball rolling downhill. The energy has shifted. It's got a lot of momentum. There's a lot of people involved, and they can't stop this. So we now have all of this public discourse about these 20,000 documents, and that's not going to end. It's just going to get more and more intense over time, more and more analysis, more and more discussion of what's in them and how incriminating it is. We're going to have the drop of more data, right? From the three sources I talked about. At least two of them we know for sure, right? The journalist and the estate, we know they're going to disseminate information. Someone else, a whistleblower, another country, this is a if, this is a maybe, this is a possible. I think it's highly possible. There were hundreds of people who saw the files, who have personally, with their own eyes, read them. And so there are a lot of potentials out there for whistleblowers. Also, I've recently kind of started to connect that there was a lawyer who was in charge of those two cases by the name of Comey, the younger, Comey the younger, not the elder. And Comey the younger was a prosecutor for both the Epi and the um, Ghislania cases. And then that person was recently fired by the circus. So that person might have motive to be a whistleblower, or to have one of their paralegals be a whistleblower, right? Or they might have actual copies of documents in their law office, who knows? But there's a lot of people. There's a lot of lawyers. There's a lot of legal staff. There's a lot of agents. There are hundreds of people who have seen these files. It's not like it was in some, crypt under secret cover with a password and nobody can see it. There were lots of people who saw it. It's really hard to keep a secret when hundreds of people know your secret. I'm just saying, you know? And let's add to these three sources, right? These three additional sources of information that I outlined. Let's add to that a really important source, and that is the survivors. So the survivors have been speaking out for some time, and they're continuing to do so. So just today, November 17th, there was another live press release where they took questions and they talked about the need for these files to be released. They've recently put out a PSA. I posted it on my post, my community post, if you want to go check it out. A really powerful PSA video where they talk about what it was like for them to be survivors. These women are not going anywhere, and these women are afraid. They're putting their lives on the line, allegedly, because this is what they said in the press conference. They said, we have seen what has happened to other survivors who spoke out against these powerful men. And so we're scared. That's what they said. Okay. That's what they believe. I don't have the details about what happened to other survivors, but keep in mind that a lot of survivors we're never going to hear from because they're either no longer with us or they're still enslaved somewhere. But these are the ones that got away. And these are the ones that are mentally well enough to speak publicly, which is no small order, because when you go through something as horrific as SA, it's so traumatizing that for a lot of women, it's just not possible to speak about it publicly, or to speak about it publicly again and again and again. Like the way these women are, they're very brave, they're very tenacious, and they're very strong-minded to be able to do the work they're doing. They're not going away. And just today, they were asked by one of the reporters, are you going to release your own list? And the women said, well, we can't personally name names because every time a woman comes forward and names names, something happens to her. That's what they said. So their lawyer stood up and said, look, none of these women are going to name names, but I will compile a list of names based on the legal documents that I have at my disposal. And he said, we will release that. So here's yet another source, brand new as of today, just a couple of hours ago. I almost forgot about it because it's so new and fresh and exciting. Brand new source of information, right? And so you see, they can't stop this. This is a snowball going downhill, gathering speed and size. There's no stopping this. There are too many. It's like an octopus. It's got too many legs. There are too many sources of information that are being released and or going to be released that they can't stop this, right? So yes, they can create a false investigation and they can say, oh, we can't release anything because we have an ongoing They could come up with these little cheats to try to stop this, but they ultimately cannot stop this. And so this is why you need to stay hopeful, and you need to keep connecting to this energy that we're in right now, this energy of revelation. Remember in August, my guide said the next couple of months are going to be all about revelation. And we've seen it, right? So many revelations in the last couple months, and it's ongoing. It's all about revelation. And of course, this is the larger theme of our whole year is, Pluto and Aquarius, things being revealed, things being broken down and overturned, things being, chaos, right? The chaos before the win. Sometimes, things get worse before they get better. And that's where we're at, right? A lot of ugly stuff is going to come out. We're going to have to hear about a lot of ugly stuff. And yet we have to trust that it's going to lead to an opportunity for us to rebuild and to create something better. So in terms of the ugly, I did want to quote from the FBI deputy director. And this was a while ago, but I think I saw this on Brian Tyler Cohen's channel. And it's a quote from this deputy director who was in charge when these cases were ongoing and who had read these files. And this is what he said. During my tenure here as the deputy director of the FBI, I have repeatedly relayed to you that things are happening that might not be immediately visible, but they are happening. The director and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It is a priority for us, but what I have learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters, the EPI files, parentheses, that's my little asterisk, has shocked me what I have learned has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. Right. So this is somebody who, right, this is his job. You know, he's used to looking at nasty stuff. He's used to looking at criminal documents and data and testimonies and videos and pictures, right? And he was shocked to his core, right? So this is how depraved and how horrific the files are. And that's why certain people don't want them released, because they are implicated in something so ugly, it's beyond most of our imagination. And that is what I was shown many months ago, that this network of bad traffic and money laundering and political leaders is so big and so ugly and going to be so shocking that it's going to completely shock everybody and completely kind of upset our structures of governance, our societal norms, our mores, our kind of ideas about people and about structures. Everything's going to be upset and thrown into kind of I don't even know what to say. Chaos, thrown into, brought to the surface, right? Revealed. And it's going to be very hard for a lot of people to hear about this. And so some people are going to have to protect themselves, right? And try not to read too much and try not to expose yourself. Especially if you're a survivor, please don't read all these posts. Please don't listen to all of the testimony. You don't have to do that. There's other ways that you can support your realm, your country, your neighbors, your family. There's other ways, right? Besides having to endure hearing about how ugly it was and is. But it has to happen because energetically, as a country and also as a planet, we're at this point energetically in the history of our country and of our planet where um, it's time. It's time for all the ugly stuff to be exposed. It's time for structures that are oppressive to be broken down. And it's time for people to kind of face the facts. And it's time for other people to face the music. And that's not going to be pretty. But it's a part of our trajectory that we have to go through this reckoning before we can create something new that's better. And that's what's on the other side of this. I've already seen this. Lots of intuitives have seen this, that we are in a shift in consciousness. We are headed to a much better world where there's going to be a lot less suffering and a lot less power imbalance. That's where we're headed, but we have to go through some things to get there. So that's what my guides have been saying for the longest. We have to go through some things. There were other ways we could have arrived at this, but this is the way we're arriving at it because we've been very resistant to change. And a lot of people have been very resistant to facing the truth of who we are and who certain people are and what they're up to and for how long they've been up to it. We've been kind of in denial, a lot of us, people with their heads in the sand and believing this myth about how things happen, meritocracy and free country. And there's all these things that we were taught to believe in that it turns out aren't really true. At least they're not true for everybody. And it's kind of a hard revelation to go through. And so we're struggling, right? A lot of people are struggling. But I just wanted to make this video just to remind everybody that we have a lot of reason to hope and that the intuitives like myself, have gotten a lot of things right. And so we might want to listen to them and or me when we say, this stuff, the truth will come out no matter what he does, no matter what they do to try to stop it, it will come out. may not come out in the way that we thought it was going to. It may not be that the files are just released by the DOJ and we all get to see them. It may not happen that way, right? So it may have to come from another country. And this is one of the things that my guide said a long time ago, was that we were going to need the involvement of an international body like the UN or NATO or ICC, that somebody else was going to have to get involved, at least when it came to revealing the truth about the big joust. And I don't know if that means it's also going to involve an international body when it comes to addressing, you know, this whole bad traffic situation, because there are people in lots of other places who are implicated. But then there are people in other places who know about it and want to stop it. So, there's always good guys. There's bad guys and there's good guys. And that's always the case. Balance, right? Everyone's not bad and everyone's not good, right? And so there are people out there who want to stop this and who want to help us. And there are other people who are benefiting from it, right? And both of those things are true. So I don't know if that's going to happen. It's hard to know. It's hard to know like exactly how everything's going to end, because there've been so many things that I've seen. I've seen his demise. I've seen his people turn against him. I've seen him confess, which he already did and didn't do anything. I've seen Starboy confess, which he already did, and it didn't do anything. But so then I keep thinking maybe he'll do it again. Maybe there'll be a bigger confession. Maybe he'll strike a deal, prosecution in exchange for telling the truth. Maybe somebody else will, right? There might be somebody who decides to hedge their bets and say, okay, I'm going to try to strike a deal and I'm going to tell the truth about what happened in exchange for some type of immunity. There are always people that do that. That might still happen. I know that there are some international things that are going on that I've heard about. I've heard that the mayor, I think it's the mayor of Chicago, has filed a complaint with the UN about human rights abuses in Chicago, and that other citizens are now sending their own complaints to the UN. There's apparently a place online you can go to make your own complaint about human rights abuses in your country. And so people are doing that. We don't know what's going to come of that. Might be something comes of that. We'll see. All right. For those of you who are used to my funny stories, I'm sorry that this wasn't a funny story today. It was really serious. I also, for those who've been asking, I am going to be doing another video today on 3i Atlas. If you're one of the people that wants to support me, this is my, I don't know how to point to that. Okay, you see that QR code up there? There it is. I cannot, I'm backwards. Anyway, that QR code is buy me a coffee. So if you want to support me, buy me a coffee. I really appreciate all the people who've already bought me coffees. And thank you to everybody who follows, who watches, who comments. I love your comments. I think it creates a little sense of community in my comments. And thank you for those of you who are members. And thank you also to those of you who belong to my Patreon. It's in my link tree below in my bio and my description. I also have, my Venmo. If you just want to Venmo me a donation to thank me for my work, that goes straight to me. No fees extracted. Thanks to everyone who does those super chats and super thanks. That's where YouTube lets you kind of give me a donation to thank me for my work. I appreciate those too. What else? Yeah. So you can also put in the comments, some people do, questions you have, and also any information you have to add to this conversation, please put it in the comments, because a lot of people do read a lot of the comments. And so when you share information like testimony from your life, like some people are sharing, oh, in my town, all the signs have come down for the red hats. That's really good for other people to know. It's very encouraging. Or if you have seen some information online that you think, adds evidence to what I'm saying, then please share it in the comments. We all want to hear. We all want to know. This is a community. This is, collaborative, right? If you're an intuitive and you're having dreams or channelings, or your guides are telling you something about what's happening or what's going to happen, please share it in the comments. There are a lot of us who are dreaming women or dreaming people, and we all have something to contribute to this conversation and to this journey that we're on. We all chose to incarnate right now and to use our gifts, right? So yeah, we came here for this. So let's do it. Let's use our gifts. Let's share. Let's do what we can to contribute to the general well-being of everybody. All right. Thank you, everybody.